What up, everybody? Welcome to our first Know the Ledge of the season. And today we have a good one. We are going to talk about Illmatic 30 years after its iconic release. So, how you feeling about this one?
Yo, this is a good one to start with. It's a good one to start with. Salute uh, to hip hop, 50 years of hip hop. We're now coming up on 51 years, man. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I remember a while back before you and I got into the doing these things live on video. I think we talked about it on one of the earlier, that was years ago, man, one of the earlier SBP or Sports Bar podcast shows. And I think we were on I don't know if we were on a different network then or not, but we talked about it. But now we've hit 30 years, man. 30 years of an album that people still talk about and people still love. And there's, you still got some people who don't quite put it up there with the greatest, even though it's revered by a lot of people as, the greatest or one of the greatest hip hop albums ever created. And everybody has their own reasons for thinking, what they think. But I think about this, man. I speak all the time about I know what I was doing when something happened, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. We've had certain tragedies that have happened around the world, and we knew where they were when it happened. We were when it happened. We had certain things that went down as a kid, or I wasn't a kid then, but I was a younger adult. I know exactly where I was and what I was doing the day Mike Tyson got knocked out. You know what I'm saying? Certain things you remember exactly what you were doing. Do you remember what you were doing the first time that you heard this album?
Yeah, I was I was at work.
Slacking on the job.
Nah, we played it out loud when I used to work at back in the day. I used to work at Crestar. That's way back.
Bro.
Before it was SunTrust, before
Yeah.
it was now Truist. But before all that, it was Crestar, and I worked overnight, like 6:30 to 3:30, 6:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m. And it was a few of us hip hop heads that worked there at that time, and that Nas came out. We put it in the. We put it in the. I believe it was a tape deck. I feel like it was a tape deck. I feel like we had it on tape. I'm pretty sure it was a tape deck that we had that we used to sit in the middle of the working space and just let that joint rock.
Yeah, I was actually on the bus. I was on the city bus. And I remember reading, I saw it in the magazine first, I saw it in the magazine first, and they were talking about this, actually about the single. And I'd already heard one of the singles. I had heard, I remember Nas's name from Live at the Barbecue.
Right.
Whatever. And of course, I had already heard Halftime. So yeah, I said, Nas, Kid Nas, everybody's talking about. So of course I'm downtown waiting for the bus, knowing I was gonna have to pass the record store anyway. For my bus, the bus stop is like on the other side of the street. So I walk into the record store, scoop it up, put it in the city, the walking joint. And I remember from the time that joint came on, I'm like, oh snap. This is ill. Like, this is crazy. I heard the intro, and then of course when I heard New York State of Mind, I'm like, this is how you get an album started, bro. This is ridiculous. And I wanted to actually start it from the beginning with New York State of Mind again, but it was just so good. I said, let me listen to the rest of this, because everybody, everything I've been saying about this kid Nas, and I fought myself not to start it over. And I listened, and man, I was in love instantly. I was like, it's some of what I've heard before, but it's something different. And I can't quite put my finger on on what it is, but I know that I like this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, but yeah, I was on the GRTC, man. I was on the city bus, traveling. Yeah, listening to that bad boy, man. So I never forget it.
I like that you remember all that from that moment, though, man, because that's dope. Like you said, there's certain certain albums, certain moments that you remember throughout your life, and Illmatic is one of those.
Definitely. Still gets a lot of play with me. Um, One thing I was thinking about is, first of all, have you ever seen the movie Zebrahead?
Nah, but that's where halftime was, right?
Yeah, that's what halftime was on. It was the soundtrack. Was on the soundtrack, and I'm like, damn, that's where it started before the album even hit. A couple years before the album even hit, and I still never seen this movie. Like, and I'm surprised because I remember being younger, and just because something hip hop was in it or on the soundtrack, I would still go check it. Right, like the movie Less Than Zero. I can't remember what Less Than Zero was about to this point, but I remember I ended up watching the movie because Public Enemy was on the Bad Boy. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, oh, this on the Less Than Zero soundtrack. I'm gonna go watch this movie, right? I've never seen Zebrahead to this day. I don't even know what it is.
See, and you saw the movie, and it was based on hip hop being involved. I copied the soundtracks. If it was one hip hop song on the soundtrack, I might get that soundtrack.
He was on it.
Yeah, yeah. Especially if it was somebody that, like Tribe, of course. But yeah, if it was hip hop on it, I was like, yeah, I gotta hear this song. And this might have been a time maybe before Tower Records or before Peaches started letting you listen to stuff. Might have been in that time frame. So it was like, well, you got to get it. That's the only way you're gonna hear
it. Have you ever had, like, can you remember another hip hop artist that did a album where it had as much, at least street buzz? Because we know that Illmatic didn't automatically like crank with the masses when it first hit. Like, it didn't do the numbers initially when it first came out. But as an artist, he had so much buzz in these streets. I guess they had the right people on it. We had, the Max Source magazines and the magazines out there putting the buzz in the street. Can you think of another artist that had this much buzz before one album, especially you've heard at least 2 or 3 of the songs before the album even hit?
Big.
Okay.
Snoop. That's kind of different though, because you had the Chronic.
Yeah.
He was all over the Chronic, so you had that.
But let's be fair about Snoop though. People had heard Snoop, especially on the West Coast. But really, what turned a lot of people on, even more people on to him, of course, is when the Deep Cover joint came out on the soundtrack. Right. People got it. Yeah, that's the dude that was on the joint with Dre. So, just, for me, Nas is a little different.
And then 50, but that was a lot of hearing mixtapes and even Power of a Dollar if you really were digging that deep. Yeah. But you heard a lot of 50 prior to hearing when his album dropped. So yeah, Nas might be different in that regard because there were only 2 songs, 2 whole songs. Well, no, 3. Back to the Grill Again. What year was that?
Back to the Grill was.
That might have been. That was before. I think that was before the album. Right?
Was that 91? I forget. But yeah.
So maybe you might have heard Nas a couple times, but you ain't really hear Nas on a whole song outside of halftime at that time, unless you were in New York maybe and you had the mixtapes and maybe not. I don't know.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I don't know how that was going for Nas at that point, but yeah.
Well, you really remember, especially back in our younger days. We were slow down here. Remember, so
absolutely.
Like, they was getting everything for then. This was out before we ever got it and before we caught the buzz. So
you ain't never heard this before? It's been out for 3 months in New York. Well, this ain't New York. We just got it. We don't know.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I'm trying to think. Do you think there's ever been a hip hop album made that was able to assemble the producers that he got, like that many great producers on like one album? I can't. I've tried hard
on a debut.
On a debut, like that's ridiculous. I've tried hard to think, and I can't.
I got one. It's not that level, but I'm just gonna mention it just because. And you and I, it's probably the first person we should think of.
Who's that?
Mad Skills.
True.
That man had Bink, Large Professor, Dilla, and somebody else I'm forgetting. Nick the
Um,
Wiz and
mhm.
somebody else. He
Yeah,
had a lineup of producers. You're like, what? How was it Clark Kent? Hold on. I gotta look it up.
go
Yeah.
ahead and look it up.
Skills Joint definitely had the producers, but as far as like, on the grandest scale and everybody knowing that it was dropping and it being with these producers up front,
Hmm.
yeah, I feel what you're saying. But Skills definitely had
He did.
shoot. Let me see. Let me see here. The good old
Yeah,
Wikipedia.
fire lineup.
Skills had, let's see, track listing. Jay Dilla, the
Yeah.
Beatnuts. Buck Wild is who I was forgetting.
Woo, woo. Crazy.
Uh, Nick Wiz, Large Professor, DJ Clark Kent,
Hmm.
Sean J. Period, and Easy LP.
Easy LP. I forgot about Easy LP.
Jeez, that's a list right there, bro. That's a list.
It's times like this I always think about Last Professor doesn't get the respect that he deserves. Like, because if you think about it, when he was putting this thing together, when he was working with Nas, he
Mm-hmm.
was the one that took him to Q-Tip. You know what I'm saying? He was the one that took him to Pete Rock. You know what I'm saying? Pete Rock is what I said. I met him first time I really met the kid. I met him. He was with he's with Paul. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
He was Live Professor. Q-Tip and him talk about it all the time about them going down to Fife's grandmother's basement. He brought him over, and they were working on which album would that have been? Would that have been Midnight Marauders by that time? I think.
94.
Yeah,
Midnight Marauders. Yeah, they would have been working on Midnight Marauders probably at the time. 93.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Bringing him over to the basement, to his Fife's grandma's basement, and he comes down there and I think you should check him, man. I think you should work with him. And they started working, and all them talking about how they were amazed at how he was spitting. And we know this, all the other great producers. We know Primo. They said Primo was present. Primo was down there, just like, just do what you do. This kid fired, but just do what you do. Don't, whatever beat you get, don't be in awe by anybody that you meet. Just do what you do. We know that you get down. And then the LES story. LES actually was, I believe he was a DJ. He was, Nas needed a DJ at the time to do some shows, I believe, and he knew LES and kind of got him to come on after to put something out with him, because he said he was always traveling. LES would give him rides to places, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
LES was kind of like, I'm along for the ride for the most part, never really understanding or knowing that at some point or another I'm gonna end up putting some music on an album for him with all these greats. You know what I'm saying? So Large Professor, man, like I don't think he don't get the respect that he deserves by letting everybody know, hey, I hooked him up with these people. Like I took him. I felt like I needed, he needed this. I needed this. I knew these people, and we cooked up something great.
And for those who don't know, Large Professor will actually be in the 804 on, I think it's June 1st. June 1st at the Charged Up event. Charged Up is having a whole festival, hip hop festival, and Large Professor will be performing.
Indeed, indeed. So I would have loved to have been like in one of them sessions, man. Like just sit back, been a fly on the wall, sit back, or pretend I can come in and don't say nothing. Put your phone, you know what I'm saying? I would have loved to have been in one of those sessions when they were actually getting down and putting this thing down. Did you ever hear the story? Yeah. Did you ever hear the lives of B? The story behind that, or what the music was supposed to be?
Nah, actually, no.
So I read somewhere, or did I see it on one of the docs? They said that so they end up using the Gap Band, Yearning for Your Love.
Mm-hmm.
They said the actual track for that was supposed to be that sample that Biggie used in Juicy.
Really?
They said that was the original, that was supposed to go with that song. And then when Nas came through, and I can't remember why they didn't use it, but Nas kind of he had heard the record or something and kind of had an ear for it. And he asked, "You got that record, whatever?" And they put it on and started listening to it. And it ended up being, the Gap Band joint that they used.
Man,
That's crazy.
when I get my actual DJ abilities together where I can do some stuff, I'm definitely taking the stems from Life's a B and putting it over Juicy. Yeah, I gotta see what that would sound like.
Yep. So that's how Big ended up with Juicy. Nas ain't used it. So that is crazy. Um, but yeah, man, for me, 30 years later, I go back and listen to this album, and I'll be honest with you, I feel close to the same way that I felt when the first time I heard it. We can debate all day about if you like a track, don't like a track, what is not as strong. But man, I just feel the exact same way. If I'm feeling a certain way, I go throw this record on. If I'm at work, shut my door in my office, do something, I throw this on. You know what I'm saying? To me, it's just as good as it was when I first heard it.
Yeah, the album quality. I actually, funny enough, that we're discussing it. Well, obviously the anniversary just passed, but last night I did a live with 420 songs, uh, Nas illmatic songs because of the 30th anniversary. And also on that same day as Nas's 30th anniversary was the 36th anniversary of Light as a Rock. Mm-hmm. So I did a live with 420 songs, illmatic, and Light as a Rock. And yeah, every Nas joint still hits the same. Definitely. Like all of them. Every song. Yeah.
Yeah, the visuals, man, because what made him so special, Nas to me is a special MC storyteller, regardless. But being a person whose one of his absolute favorite albums ever is The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. You're gonna catch my ear if I can hear you in a song telling a story so clean that I can see it. You know what I'm saying? Or you're talking about things that I can see it just so clearly just by your words. And we listened to Illmatic, and it kind of seemed like not only was Nas talking about his life and the things that he saw and the things that were around him, he talked about, it seems like you can feel him contemplating, this is what it's supposed to be. This is what it is. This is what I saw. Is there something better out there? This is what I went through. I could see almost everything that he was talking about on the majority of these songs, or I could feel it. Then you tap into the fact that lyrically and some of the catchphrases and things that he used is some of the best ever. Because now I'm thinking in my mind, being an old head, as I'm talking about The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. But I love me some Rakim. And the thing about Rakim, we captured a lot of people was a lot of the things that he said, the lyrics, the wordplay, you can be in advance. And I hear so much of both of these MCs in this particular album that I can tell how much of an influence they were on him. And I think that was one of the reasons that I was and I'm still so in love with Illmatic, man.
That makes sense. Yeah, especially the lyrical part of it. When you look at the lyrical part, along with the fact, as Nas later said, my first album had no major guest appearances.
Mm-hmm.
The outcome crowned the best lyricist. On Illmatic was AZ, who nobody knew.
Nobody knew him. Yeah.
And Nas on the hook. I guess you could say P Rock was on the hook, but not Nas on the hook. Sorry, Q-Tip on the hook.
One Love.
And you could say P Rock was on the hook. I guess of The World Is Yours. Mm-hmm. Is he actually on the hook? I feel like it's
P Rock.
Yeah. Yeah. So those weren't verses. So it was really just Nas. That was part of the the mystique of the album as well. It was a young guy who was actually 20 when it actually dropped, but this young artist who's been on the scene for the last couple of years, bubbling, working with a whole bunch of great producers, like legendary producers even at that time, and holding his own and creating this project.
Straight fire. You're talking about misses. I know you heard about Russell Simmons passed on him.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Russell said he had a lot of misses, but this is one of the ones that kind of like he looks at like how, and you know how Russell talk, how in the, did I do that? You know what I'm saying? And his reason at the time was one of the reasons was he was looking for originality, and he mentioned that to him he sounded too much like I like Cool G rap.
Exactly. Exactly.
Russ said he sounded like Cool G rap. And he also said that he was pretty sure that album that Illmatic was gonna flop.
Well, not that it flopped, but he wasn't wrong about sales, or you know, out the gate. He wasn't wrong about that, but he definitely missed on Nas's impact out the gate, though, because not it ain't hard to tell. Even though that wasn't one of my favorite songs when it first dropped, because I'm thinking, oh, it's a Michael Jackson joint, and you know, it was an obvious sample, so I wasn't really that keen on obvious samples at that time. I just was not. But even with that, like that was the hook of the song. That was the hook of the album for a lot of people. That was the hook of the album, and it brought a lot of eyes to the project. So, as history shows, you know, in the long run, or in the words of CeeLo, in the end, we'll see, and we see.
Mm-hmm. Man, so the thing is about that is, and you mentioned the fact that, and I mentioned earlier as well, that it didn't just fly out the gate on everybody, you know, but still to hear the stories of the people up at the Source magazine, and they were talking about how we ended up with 5 mics. It's crazy. Like it's crazy with some, you know, something that doesn't come out. Like a lot of, I'm like when Biggie, to me, like when Biggie hit that first album, he hit. Like it didn't take long for everybody to like boom. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Who is this? Oh shoot! Oh, it's crazy on Ready to Die. It took a little bit of time for those outside of New York or up north to really, you know, catch the wave and for it to blow up the way that it did. But to get 5 mics, you know, out the gate, like off top at the beginning, that's just saying that, you know, it's something special. It's just something special, man. And I know people debate whether or not, I've heard people's reasons of why it's not a 5 mic album. I hear people talk all the time, and to each their own. You have a personal preference. That as people right here in the SBP that have mentioned that they like It Was Written better than this particular album.
Yep.
That's your personal preference. That's perfectly fine. I like It Was Written too. I just don't like it better than this. But you go back and look at all these 5 mic albums that we've had, and granted, we may still like to listen to them, but how many of those albums are really talked about as much by, you know, real hip hop heads, you know, than this album?
You know, I actually, between our first show and this show, I posted a video on TikTok asking what hip hop albums, or name a hip hop album that someone could tell you is the greatest hip hop album of all time, and you won't argue it. Like it's a valid answer. And this all that topic came about because of this album. Somebody actually asked me in the comments the other day when I was talking about Illmatic. They were like, "When did Illmatic actually become the considered the greatest hip hop album of all time?" And they said over It Takes a Nation of Millions. And I don't know that It Takes a Nation of Millions was considered the greatest album, but I'm sure I've read that in magazines at some point. But I don't know if at the time, whenever Illmatic became the album to people, I don't know what was number one at that time in people's mind. I don't even know. I think that was a great question, and I don't have a real answer.
Interesting. When did it? I guess some people it's always been. I mean, for some folks, I mean, different time that they heard it.
Right.
But then again, you mentioned the Nation of Millions, which actually I would ever consider it the greatest album of all time, even though it's still special
right.
to me. But everybody has different opinions on it. I'm sure you got some wild answers out of when you ask that question.
Yeah, we're gonna see what comes up. We're gonna see what comes up.
Man, so one thing I always we always got to have a debate. So it didn't just start with the kids today, kind of compare everything. We were doing a little bit too. Even in our younger adult days when we were a lot younger. 30 years ago, we were definitely like a lot younger. But it always comes up about AZ and Nas on that album. And people quick to point out, yeah, I mean, it's a nice album and everything, but you let AZ come on there and outshine you on a song. Now, what I admit, when I first heard it, I was like, God, who is this? I mean, he was spitting like, oh snap! I didn't never not like Nas's verse,
right?
But I'm like, yo, AZ. I'm looking at the back of the joint while I'm on the bus. I'm like, AZ, But as fire as what he said on that album, his lyrics on that album, going back years later and consistently listening to Nas, what he spits on that, I got just as much appreciation, for it. His flow was, he didn't come out with the same flow. AZ style's totally different.
Right.
But I still got mad respect for Nas's verse. I'd never disrespect his verse on that particular song.
See, and now I've never really, like, when a song is not just a bragging song or I'm nicer than everybody's song, I've never, even with those songs, I've never really been like, this person outshine this person on this record like it's it's an actual competition. To me, I've always looked at it like, we're going into this to make the best song possible. Yeah, I mean, somebody might outshine somebody, but it's also the idea of not knowing who AZ was, barely knowing Nas and not knowing who AZ was, and then AZ pops up and his verse was crazy. AZ's verse, to me, was his crowning moment in his career. Like, I know people will argue his first album, and I get that, but to me, Life's a B was it. That was the pinnacle. And I don't say that as if that's a bad thing, because some people are like, well, they reached their height at the beginning. Their height was so high that it was hard to attain again.
Mm-hmm.
People say the same thing about Nas with Illmatic. People that love Illmatic and put Illmatic, on that pedestal, they say the same thing. Like, Nas's first album was his best work. It had, that has nothing to do with him being great or having great albums after that. It's just that one hit a certain peak in people, and it is what it is at this point.
Do you feel like maybe I don't know if I'm the only one that's seen it, but I feel like every time Search tells a story about them putting this thing together, him helping them, I've been seeing a lot of disrespect from like hip hop heads, like he's exaggerating or he's wailing about this, and I'm like, I don't think Search is exaggerating about any of this stuff. When it comes to on what he helped negotiate, clearing samples, things of that nature, because he's out here telling it to the public on some of the most watched platforms on social media, and you've never once heard Nas come back and say anything bad about Search, saying that's allowed, that's not true. I just don't get it. And I've seen that not only through a clip that I threw up on TikTok a while back. I think of the Matt Hoffa interview, but I've seen it in other platforms. I'm like, what is it? Why y'all disrespecting Search? Like, we see people say things all the time, but Search is out here telling it so everybody can hear it. I don't think he'd be dumb enough to sit there and tell you how things went down or how he helped, or and knowing darn well that Nas and everybody in this camp can hear it and come back and say that he's lying. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's because he's white in hip hop, and it's a white person trying to take credit for of Black
Yeah.
person's success. But I I don't take it as Search trying to take credit for his success, because Search said Nas was going to be Nas regardless, but I just happened to be the person to facilitate this and that. I buy that, because Nas, people act like Nas didn't have a deal or had deals on the table or something. Nas had deals on the table. Search just
Right.
helped him find a better deal.
Yep.
He was like, I'm gonna help you get the best deal for you, as opposed to everybody else or other labels, whoever, uh, trying to take full advantage of a young artist. Search was trying to help that man have a better career. Basically, he was trying to help him have a better career. I don't have no problem with Search's stories. I don't, whether I believe everything he says or not is neither here nor there. But as far as Nas, I've never heard him say anything that made me be like, he just saying that just because. Because like you said, and nobody disputes it.
Yeah.
Or at least the people that matter don't dispute it.
Indeed. What is what's your favorite track off this album? Can you pick one?
No, not really. and I mean, I love Liza B. But I could easily say The World Is Yours and be just as happy. I could also say Represent. Like, I could also say One Love. It could go. I could also say New York State of Mind. So
yeah,
it's like 5 out of 9.
It's hard for me too. I'm gonna always go back to New York State of Mind, but just because of the fact that it just comes out banging. You know what I'm saying? This off top just comes out banging. So I'm gonna always say that, but each one of these songs has something, that's always gonna be close to my heart. But what I live by, my favorite verse. I even had it on my Facebook page. I never sleep because sleep is the cousin of death. I remember hearing that and I was like, what did he just say? Oh, let's go back. I never sleep because sleep is the cousin of death. You think about somebody that young writing that verse, just writing that line. That's crazy to me, And then the Medusa line as well. That's crazy. Like everything's just crazy to me because you got to look at Medusa to do what he's talking. Like if you look at Medusa, you turn to stone. Give it shotguns and hell. It's crazy.
So it ain't hard to tell,
huh? It ain't hard to tell. Yeah. I read someone say there's 2 versions of that too. I think from what he originally wrote when he wrote the song, and then what's actually on the album. Because there's one of them that says, what was it that I read a while ago? It said said something about he smokes blunts with Medusa and giving shotguns in hell. Then it's the Jonas on the album. But anyway, it's either here or there, But I wonder if Large Professor has something to do with that, because Nas admits that as good of a writer that he was, he said that Large Professor, when they were doing these songs together, would tell him, say that. No, don't say that. Can you please put something else right here?
Yeah.
So I wonder just how much. And he said that Nas said he never took offense to it. He was just happy to be on, and that somebody had that much faith in him. So he said just about anything that Large Professor told him, now that wouldn't go good right there. Now change that, this, that, and the third. He did it, and it all worked out.
That is the value of an actual dope producer, since somebody that's actually producing a record, as opposed to somebody making a beat and you just rap on it and then that's the end of it. And you're listening to a guy that produced for Eric B. and Rakim, so he was no slouch.
True indeed. Favorite beat on this joint?
Beat?
Can you do that? We talking about favorite song. Is there one of these producers? All of them put out fire music on here. Is there one that you would say is your absolute favorite between what Tip did, what Primo did, what Professor did, what LES did, Pete Rock.
That's tough, man. I go back to New York State of Mind and One Love. It's tough, but I can still say the world is yours. That very easily.
You couldn't. Man, that's a tough one too. Yeah, I'm probably off top is going to be New York State of Mind, but then I'm with you. I'll go through the album and I'll sit there and listen to Primo come back with Represent, and dun, 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 dun. I'm like, I like this too. Halftime is special in his own way. It's different, but still, depends on what frame of mind you're in when you listen to that. One Love sounds like it would be produced by Q-Tip. I'm with it.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? It's just crazy. What I did find out though, you mentioned earlier about the Michael Jackson sample.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear they said that wasn't even close to the hardest one to get cleared?
Mm.
It wasn't that. It wasn't the Gap Band. It wasn't any of those joints in that. Do you know what the hardest one to get cleared was? You hear about that?
No.
It was the beginning intro to Genesis.
Oh yeah.
Because it was a sample from Wild Style. And
really?
They said that Fab Five Freddy had a lot to do with that, being able to use that sample.
Wow.
Yeah, so they went and talked to the people over at Wild Style. They gave Fab Five, I think, a little bit of a hassle about certain things they wanted and the money and all that stuff. But they eventually got it done. But they said, believe it or not, that all the samples used on this album, that the Genesis from the Wild Style movie was the hardest to get clear.
Imagine being the person at Wild Style if they wouldn't have allowed the clearing of the sample. They would look like a complete nut job. They would have been kicking themselves. Oh yeah, definitely.
So I guess at the end of the day, man, both of us, 30 years later, we still looking at this album as something that we both love. And I know we talked about this maybe a couple of times before. So if the Source was out now, Source magazine was still out now, and they were still doing the mics, and for old albums, and you go back and you can rate them 1 through 5. At this point, like I said, this has been out for 30 years. It came out earlier this week. The 19th made it 30 years. Are you giving this album 5 mics after 30 years? Yeah, for sure.
5.
For sure.
5 of them.
Yeah.
5 mics, 5 beers.
5 beers. Yeah, and like I say, I told you many times, I don't have a complaint about anything on this. My complaint, the one thing that I used to have, and it really wasn't a complaint, but I used to say the album was only 40 minutes, 39 and some change to be exact. And I said, man, that's kind of short though. I go back to some of these other albums, like 50 minutes, hour, But you brought up a great point. The last time you and I spoke on this, and it put it in a whole new perspective for me when you said maybe that's really all they needed to be. And when you said that, every time I listen to the album after, especially the first few times after you mentioned, I'm like, he is so on point. That's all it really needed to be. Can you put it in clear? That's all it needed to be. It needed to be 40 minutes, and it's still perfect to me. But that was the only thing I had to say that was against it. I really wouldn't say I was against it, but maybe because the music was so great, I wanted more.
Exactly. And that makes sense. But then when we get to more, we get to watering down stuff. I don't know if you follow. Do you follow the questions on Instagram? I think it's called the question.
I follow, but it's not coming. It's not coming to.
Okay, the questions it's like I guess they do a podcast and they do interviews for hip hop Then they have a game out now, just
Okay.
asking hip hop questions. But
Yes.
they
Yeah.
they have a thing that they do called Making Illmatic, which they take other albums. I've actually never watched any of these videos, but the idea is great. Making Illmatic, so taking other albums that are longer, chopping them into 10 tracks, well, 9 songs, 10 tracks, I guess. So it's the same number of tracks as Illmatic, and seeing if it's a classic if you break it into 10 songs. I don't know if they actually see if it is, but they try to make it a classic with using 10 songs like Illmatic. I was like, that's a fire idea. I don't want to steal
That
your
is
idea,
beyond fire.
but
That is a beyond
that's
fire.
that's a dope idea.
I'm definitely have to check that out. So I guess the consensus is 30 years later, this is still a dope album. The replay value with a lot of people, especially myself, I know it's still out there, it's still large. And hey, you know, this man has got to perform this album live now. What it had a symphony, like all this stuff. How many people get to do that? You do an album that's so great that you get to do that, bro.
At the Kennedy Center. Yeah.
Kennedy Center. You know, and you got the Library of Congress out there. I've selected you, you know what I'm saying, for preservation in the National Recording Registry. Like, those no small feats, man. You know what I'm saying? Nothing small about that.
And we've mentioned Nas and Primo with the songs they have on Illmatic. We got to mention that on the 30th anniversary of Illmatic, Nas and Primo dropped a song.
Yeah.
And
I like
alluded to a whole album being done with just them two.
Please, let's get that done.
Yeah.
Let's get that done. And I believe it too, because I remember something, I don't know what I was watching, but it had Primo on it. And the question came up, or somebody mentioned something, and this was maybe a few months ago, and he didn't deny it. You know, he didn't deny it in some of the words that they are either talking or already working on something. Yeah, so let's hope, man. Let's hope.
Yeah, we need
that's
that after 30 years. And with Primo saying it, I believe it. If Pete Rock said it, I'm not believing it, because I still haven't heard Pete Rock with Ghostface, Raekwon, Common. Like, it's so many imaginary Pete Rock albums I'm waiting on.
Yeah.
But with Nas and Primo saying it, I believe that.
Man, I even saw a picture not long ago of him and CL back together. And, you know, they hadn't been on the best of terms for years. I was like, man, can you at least give me a hope? Can you at least spin a track for me? Just one?
Give me something. Give me something.
Just give me one track. You ain't got to give me a whole album. I ain't saying you have to reunite, but
let me get one reel.
Let me get one. No doubt. 30 years of iconic excellence from the album Illmatic by Nas.
Yo.
Anything else need to be said about it?
What more can we say?
Nothing else need to be said. It's a dope album. It ain't hard to tell, bro. Appreciate y'all checking out Know the Ledge. On this occasion here, we got more coming. 1994 will make 30 years for a whole lot of it'll be 30 years for a whole lot of albums this year. So we're gonna hit a few. You know, we got ready. We got plenty coming. So one or two might float into the football season. We'll figure that out. So appreciate you sticking with your boys. Know the Ledge, y'all. We out.
Yep.